Hello, welcome to my creature feature, which is on the cuttlefish. My name is Gemma. So we'll start with taxonomy. Kingdom, Eukarya. So these are organisms uh, with cells that contain a nucleus and membrane organelles. So you can see up in the left hand, in the right hand corner, you have a cell that has a nucleus in the center, and you have the organelles around it, like ribosomes and other things like that. The kingdom, Animalia. So these are more defined as like multicellular creatures. So you have large scale animals, obviously are multicellular, down to groupings of cells that make up an organism that could be microscopic. Phylum, Mollusca. So these are getting more general or more narrow. So you have your snails, your squids, and your clams. And then class. I'm gonna actually phone a friend on this bad Larry.
Cephalopoda.
So these are getting more defined, and at this point, they have very large skulls, so they have large brains, and because of this, a lot of these creatures are actually really intelligent. And then we have our order,
Sapieida.
which brings us to our cuttlefish, which is going to be the topic of today, obviously. Alright, so things to know. So length, usually the average guys are around 6 to 10 inches, and then once we get into our larger scale species, we're talking about 20 inches. Lifespan is 1 to 2 years, and we'll talk about predators that might be the reason for the end of that lifespan. And then species number is we have about 120 different species. So the cuttlefish is a brainy invertebrate. So this means that obviously, as you can tell by the picture, the majority of their body is made up by their brain and their skull. So they're very intelligent, and that's where they get this nickname from. They have sucker tentacles, and we'll talk about why they're used and how they're used by the cuttlefish. And they also have camera-like eyes. If you can see in the top picture, you can kind of see what the eye looks like. Alright, so diet and what feeds on them. So a cuttlefish diet consists of you have mollusks, crabs, shrimp, fish, octopus, worms, and even other cuttlefish. And then what eats cuttlefish? So we have a lot of different variants. We have anything from mammals to fish and birds. So it's pretty interesting. A lot of things feed on them, as well as, like I said, their own kind. So moving on. Alright, so now we're going to talk about location. So, as you can see from the map, they're mostly on the eastern hemisphere, and they live in shallow waters. So, obviously, coral reefs are a part of shallow waters, and there are a main component of where they live is coral reefs. So, they obviously contribute to the things that go on there. And from the map, we can tell that they're from the eastern southern coast of Asia, the coastline of Africa, Mediterranean Sea, and the coast of Western Europe, and a huge part is also the coast of Australia. Okay, moving on. Alright, so what makes this cuttlefish so special is one of its superpowers is its ability to camouflage. So, as you can see, there seems to be many different kinds of cuttlefish on this page. However, they're actually all the same species. Cuttlefish are great at changing their shape, their size, their color, and their texture, and we'll get into that more as the presentation goes on. And possibly gender. This is actually false. They can't change their gender. However, they could pull a special little trick. So obviously, strong males mate with strong females. So you'll have a lot of smaller cuttlefish that can't really get into the mating process because they're not big enough. But a lot of them are smart enough to disguise themselves as females, so they'll change their color during the mating period, and they'll hide one of their or two of their legs to appear as a female, and they'll move to the front of the pack and then change back their color and mate with an actual female. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and it shows you that the cuttlefish can even trick its own kind. Okay, this is just a quick picture of another example of their camouflage. So on the left, you can see, you can kind of see the rough shape, but, as a fish, you probably wouldn't be able to see that. And then you have the exposed view of the cuttlefish, and you get to see how truly good they are at camouflaging. So, benefiting from the cuttlefish, one of them is jewelers actually use this inner shell called the cuttlebone as a type of mold for jewelry. So you can see that to the right there's a picture, and it has a nice texture on the piece of jewelry, whatever it tends to be. So the cuttlebone is it's kind of like the shell that they evolved from, like clams. So instead of having it on the exterior, they've evolved to have this on the inside of their body. And so this helps with buoyancy, and it inflates with gas, so they can obviously change their position in the water column. And what they are actually carving into is a very soft calcium, and so they can carve in their design, whatever they're gonna mold it into, and it's very, very strong and heat resistant, so that it can withstand these precious metals and still get a nice casting. So this benefit is not like other benefits that we've seen. It's not medical or anything like that, but it's definitely an economic benefit. So benefit number 2, this one's actually really interesting, is that cuttlefish have these chromatophoric cells, and these allow them to change their colors and textures and so on. So the benefit is that a lot of people are using this information from cuttlefish and other animals, such as the octopus, who have the same cells, to design things like on the left you have a biker, so they're coming up with different clothing that can change color during the time of day, and also the temperature, so that bikers can be more safe while they're biking, so people can obviously see them if they're in cars. You have solar panels, which kind of do the same thing. They change their colors, or the idea is that they'll change their colors during different times of the year based on weather and season and how much sunlight, so that they can optimize how much sunlight they can draw in. And then on the far right you have military uniform. So the idea is that to design a uniform that can blend into any background. So these are certainly huge benefits for humans in the future. So how these cells actually work. So you have kind of like a balloon full of pigment, and so you'll have balloons that are filled with brown pigments and yellow pigments and all sorts of different kinds of colors. And if you can see in the top black and white picture, there's like these kind of like tendons, but they're actually muscle tissue, and the muscle tissue pull these balloons open, and they allow them to get bigger or smaller, And so this is much like humans breathing, where they can choose to control them, or they can kind of have it automatically, just once they get into a setting, it automatically blends in. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So just to concrete the idea that these cells are separate little balloons that help to change the overall color of the cuttlefish, I put in this picture. So this is a picture of Impressionism, which is a type of painting. So as you can see, like a cuttlefish, this first blown up picture is like pigment balloons. They're just little dots scattered throughout the painting. And that's much like, a cuttlefish being able to change different colors and different pigment sizes and volume that fills up those balloons. And then moving to the other side, you can see a picture of a man. So these little dots kind of blend together when you get to a distance, and it creates a full picture. And that full picture obviously is whatever it happens to be blending into. So in conclusion, the cuttlefish is extremely interesting. It's very smart. It's very complex. There's still a lot to learn about these creatures, especially with its camouflage and how it changes its texture. It has a wide variety of prey and a very wide variety of predators, from mammals all the way to fish and birds. It likes its tropical regions. It likes the warm water, shallow waters, and it's definitely an inhabitant of coral reefs. And it offers many benefits in many different ways, as you can tell from, energy, smart and green energy, all the way to military uniforms and economic wise for jewelry. Thank you for watching. Do you have any questions? And the next slide are my sources.